Taxes was taxing. Now taxes is relaxing when you file for free.
I can file for free? TurboTax Free Edition. Roughly 37% of filers qualify. Simple Form 1040 returns only. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free. I can file for free.
Now this is taxes. File for free with TurboTax Free Edition and get your maximum refund. No schedules except for earned income tax credit, child tax credit, and student loan interest. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free.
And other polarizing policies that weaken our armed forces and discourage our nation's fine men and women from enlisting to serve in defense of our liberty. The NSC staff will need to consolidate the functions of both the NSC and the Homeland Security Council, HSC, incorporate the recently established office of the National Cyber Director, and evaluate the required regional and functional directorates. Aforementioned prerequisites, the NSC should be properly resourced with sufficient policy professionals, and the NSA should prioritize staffing the vast majority of NSC directorates with aligned political appointees and trusted career officia. For instance, the NSA should return all non-essential detailees to their home agencies on their first day in office, so that
the NSA should return
non-essential detailees
non-essential people. So they're basically saying we should downsize all government positions, even the NSA, the CIA, everybody, every single thing. If they're non-essential, send them home. And that's what Donald Trump did, actually. He did do that. He did it to the FCC or the FAA or whoever it is. He did it to the people that are responsible for like air traffic control, and look where it got us. That was a genius move. Good job, Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation. We should have realized that they were complete fuck-ups when they gave us Obamacare. Yes, they wrote Obamacare. Same guys that did Project 2025. We should have known that they like taking half measures and doing things in a backhanded way. Things that they probably know damn well aren't going to work.
Their home agencies on their first day in office, so that the new administration can proceed efficient without the personnel landmines left by the previous stewards, and as soon as possible should replace all essential detailees with staff aligned to the new president's priorities. The HSC.
So they're saying that they want to replace everybody in office, every single government employee, even civilian employees, replace them all with Trump lackeys, with Trump supporters, basically.
Has overseen pandemic response, and its incorporation is important. In the end, change requires intervention, and the NSC staff should be appropriately recruited, manned, and empowered to achieve the president's national security and foreign policy objectives and maintain robust policy analysis and discussion while minimizing resistance from those who have an agenda or who jealously guard their resources and autonomy at the expense of national security and sound policy development.
Wow, dude. It's so fascinating how they word this stuff, but did you catch that one more time?
And discussion while minimizing resistance from those who have an agenda or who jealously guard their resources and autonomy at the expense of national security and sound policy development.
So those who jealously guard their autonomy at the expense of what we want to do. We need to protect the country from people who jealously hoard their autonomy. Jesus Christ. They're saying we want to centralize power. We want to centralize power reworded in a backhanded way. That is psychotic.
This resistance and inertia can be inadvertently enabled by a small and unempowered NSC. Additionally, the White House Chief of Staff and NSA must ensure that the NSC is functioning in tandem with the rest of the White House staff to benefit from the best strategic thinking of the president's top advisors. History shows that an unsupervised NSC staff can stray from its statutory role and adversely affect a president and his policies. Moreover, while
a lot of these organizations, they're not supposed to be about supporting the president. Yes, they are under the executive branch, which is the president's branch of government, but they're supposed to be working in favor of the people, not the president. They're not supposed to even obey the president necessarily. In fact, they're not supposed to obey the president. Full stop. They're supposed to, the EPA, for example, is supposed to work to benefit the people, not the president.
The NSC should be fully incorporated into the White House. It should also be allowed to do its job without the impediment of duly hatted staff that report to other office. For instance, the NSC needs its own counsel to inform what legal options can be provided to the president. The White House counsel should be part of that policy process as the president's top legal advisor. These recommendations provide a clear roadmap for rapidly sizing and solidifying the NSC staff to support and achieve the president's objectives beginning on Inauguration Day. National Economic Council. The National Economic Council is one of the policy councils serving the president along with the NSC and the Domestic Policy Council, DPC. The director serves as principal advisor to the president on domestic and international economic policy and communicates the president's economic message to the media. The deputy director is responsible for the day-to-day operation of the council, which includes chairing the committee that coordinates economic policy development at the deputy secretary level.
So the deputy secretary basically chairs all of this stuff. He is responsible for like oversight over everything. And they're saying that they want to replace the deputy secretary with a political actor. It's somebody that supports Trump at any cost whatsoever. I just finished writing a book titled Was Hitler an Atheist? It talks about religions during the Third Reich and how they work together. Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Protestants. And I even address the lies told by the evangelical world about Bonhoeffer. It's on Audible and Amazon. Okay, let's continue.
In effect, the director and deputy director are the officia who are primarily responsible for the development of economic policymaking for the administration. Once a policy is adopted, it is the appropriate agency's responsibility to implement it. The NEC's policy process is also used to determine whether the president should support or oppose legislation passed by Congress. In addition to its leadership, the NEC has policy experts, for example, special assistants to the president or SAPs, who are responsible for developing and coordinating, as well as advising the president on specified issues. It is essential that the policy expertise of the NEC reflect the current environment's most pressing issues. Today, this would include, among other topics, taxes, energy and environment, technology, infrastructure, healthcare, financial services, workforce, agriculture, antitrust and competition policy, and retirement programs.
So they're saying that this office adopts the president's policies and writes them into a more formal kind of breakdown or whatever, and then gives those in kind of policies or instructions or whatever to the EPA and the FCC and stuff. And those organizations try to bring the organizations more into line with the goals of the president. That's what they're saying here. I'm not sure if that's current policy or if they're saying that that's what they want to do, but the EPA should be independent of the president, and they should only be looking out for the good of the people. That's it. Shouldn't be like working to push a political goal or whatever.
NEC's SAPs should have a working knowledge of how the administration can implement policy through the rulemaking process, although it is not necessary that they be experts on regulation themselves, particularly given OMB's role. This will facilitate the NEC's effectiveness in coordinating administration policy. The NEC needs to work closely with other office within the executive office of the president to promote innovation by the private sector and create an environment that will stimulate economic activity while reducing federal spending and debt.
They're basically, with this one, they frame this in such a positive way, but what they mean when they say that is they want to privatize everything, like erode the government completely, like get rid of everything good that the government does, Social Security, for example, and make it a private company that can like gain interest off of this shit instead of the government. We should be eliminating the government as much as possible. Like, what is wrong with you people? My God, really?
This includes working with the DPC, NSC, OMB, Council of Economic Advisors, Office of Intergovernmental Affair, Office of Cabinet Affair, White House Council, Council on Environmental Quality, Office of Legislative Affair, Office of Science and Technology Policy. To this end, the NEC director should standing meeting with the principals from each of the other EOP office to enhance coordination from within the White House. In the past, there has been tension among the DPC, NEC, and NSC over jurisdiction. It is important.
I'm unfamiliar with what like all of these organizations are, but they're federal programs. I can surmise that at the very least.
To set clear jurisdictions at the start of an administration to prevent needless and counterproductive turf fight. In addition, the principal deputy for international...
Prevent needless and counterproductive turf fight. What they mean is they want to do things that are that may or may not be illegal. In fact, they say outright in this, they are illegal, the things that we want to do. They are unconstitutional, they're against the law, and if we did them, then there would be pushback, legal pushback. They're saying we want to get people in those positions so that there, quote unquote, won't be a turf fight. Okay, turf fight is not the same as constitutional crisis.
Economic policy is jointly appointed at NEC and NSC and could end up serving two different interests. To avoid such problems, international economic policy should be entirely coordinated from NEC. It will be especially important for the NEC to work seamlessly with the Council of Economic Advisors, CEA, which provides the President and the White House office with the latest economic data and forecasts, as well as estimates of the economic impact of proposed policies, and prepares the annual economic report of the President. The CEA is not a policy council, and therefore does not run policy processes, which is the responsibility of the NEC, DPC, and NSC. However,
again, not familiar with these organizations, but you get the overarching idea they're getting at here.
The CEA does play a key role in ensuring that any policy considered by the councils is rigorously evaluated for its economic impacts. The NEC works closely with the White House Office of Communications.
So they just said is rigorously vetted to determine its economic impacts. What they mean is to determine if we can cut spending in some way. You know, there are some things that shouldn't have a profit motive behind them. They should not. If I need an appendix removal, like my appendix is about to burst or even has burst, you can charge me anything that you want for that. The hospital can charge me $10 million and put me on a payment plan, and I'd have no choice but to pay it or die. Do I want to live in debt? All right, let me phrase. Do I want to pay something off for the rest of my life or die right now? The answer is obvious. That's an inelastic demand. We can't add a profit motive into those. When people absolutely need it and there is no other choice, there should not be a profit motive. That's not the only example of inelastic demands by any stretch of the imagination. Soda, like, that you get from a grocery store, soda or like Red Bull, that's not an inelastic demand. Even if you want an energy drink, you can choose different energy drinks. You don't have to get that. So they have to keep their prices as low as possible. We shouldn't have the profit motive in inelastic demands. We just should not. Now, what they're talking about here, like the government steps in to prevent profit motives from getting in the way of inelastic demands a lot of the time. They're saying they want to privatize this stuff. In my personal opinion, insurance should not be privatized, including car insurance. Car insurance shouldn't be privatized. It should be provided by the government for free and covered by our taxes. And the government makes nothing from it. They're just there to administrate. There are all kinds of different, like renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, flood insurance. That shit should not be privatized. Do you know, I had a friend that worked in the flood insurance industry, and he had to he had to approve payouts and stuff every year. The rest of the year they'd make a ton of money. They wouldn't be able to cover the amount that they spent on the flood, on administration and everything. So the U.S. government would come in and they would cover the extra amount that they couldn't cover. They're subsidizing the losses. The government was subsidizing the losses. But if they do make more one year, they're privatizing the successes. They're privatizing the gains, if you will. That's what these companies do that have like inelastic demands, and honestly, like a lot of other companies too. They're privatizing the successes, the profits, keeping everything that they make, and they're socializing the losses. If they can't pay for it, if they don't have enough, the government steps in and pays. Or more accurately, you step in and pay. And we are paying for flood insurance unless these people are making a profit. Then we don't see a dime of it. We need to nationalize all insurance, all of it. Cover everything. Somebody gets cancer and they need $100,000 in like chemotherapy, pay it. I will pay an additional $100 a year in taxes to make sure that those people can get their cancer treatment. I'll do it gladly. I'll be the first one in line every year to pay, to make sure that everybody, especially people that have cancer, can be treated. Everybody, including the ones that have an appendix burst, can be treated. And again, in an ideal world, I will pay an extra $10 a year to make sure that if somebody gets in a car accident, that it's covered. That somebody goes to the hospital or something because they get all mangled from this terrible accident, that it's all covered. Inelastic demands should not be driven by the profit motive.
Rigorously evaluated for its economic impacts. The NEC works closely with the White House Office of Communications and Office of Speechwriting to ensure that the White House's messaging and media engagement communicate the president's economic policy effectively.
I don't know if you caught what they just said there, but they said, we want to put the speechwriter on staff. We want to staff the speechwriter so that we can write into his speeches what we want to communicate. We being Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation. They are trying to staff the president's speechwriters. The Heritage Foundation, after Brown v. Board of Education, that was kind of a tipping point in the country. It was when black people and white people were no longer legally segregated. And that from that moment on, the conservative right-wing movement changed. They changed focus. They changed tactics. They changed everything to focus more on, to reword things in such a way that it could sound like they're trying to stop racism, when in reality, with like affirmative action, they're trying to make things more racist. They're trying to make things worse. The Heritage Foundation is the Heritage Foundation is made up of the people that were alive during Brown versus Board of Education and are unhappy with the fact that people are desegregated now. It's the same people.
The NEC also plays a key role in advancing the president's economic agenda by advising the Office of Presidential Personnel on appointments to key economic posts, including positions in financial regulatory agencies. The NEC helps to ensure that each economic post is held by a person who shares the president's policy priorities and works well with the rest of the administration's economic team. The financial regulators are run partly by civil servants, some of whom were political appointees in prior liberal administrations, who often resist a conservative administration's policies.
Well, I mean, they resist extremism. I don't think anybody resists conservative policies necessarily. These are just people that are there to do their job. They're not here to take a political stand or whatever. They're just doing their job. That's it.
It is therefore critical that an administration not only appoints capable individuals to lead these agencies, but also has personnel who can be hired into senior staff positions within the agencies. A few areas will be especially important if the NEC is to develop a well-defined economic policy agenda. One is the promotion of innovation as a foundation for economic growth and opportunity. Another is the creation of an environment that fosters economic growth through tax reform and the elimination of regulatory and procedural barriers. Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative provides the President with the internal White House resources necessary to formulate and execute a unified, whole-of-government approach to trade policy. The President should ensure that the USTR is empowered to serve in that leadership role, much as other EOP components organize and drive a coordinated policy agenda on behalf of the President.
It's interesting because these people want to eliminate the Department of Education, for example, but this one organization they want to keep. I wonder why.
The People's Republic of China's predatory trade practices have disrupted the open market trading system that has...
The People's Republic of China, their trade practices have disrupted trade, they said, I think.
Provided mutual benefit to all participating countries, including China, for decades. The failure of the World Trade Organization, WTO, to discipline China for abrogation of its trading commitments has seriously undermined its credibility.
Don't trust a word out of their mouths, not one. They lie all through this entire thing and twist things around, distort it in absolutely bizarre ways. So just be very skeptical of what they say. Don't believe a single word by default. Look everything up, even trivial stuff.
Made it a largely ineffective institution. The United States, through an empowered USTR, must act to rebalance and refocus international trading relationships in favor of democratic nations that embrace free, fair, and open trade principles built on market-driven economies. Chapter 26 of this book outlines recommended trade policy priorities for the incoming president. However, regardless of the approach, successful implementation of that trade agenda will require the president to articulate a clear policy direction and instructions for the executive branch to operate in a coordinated fashion under the leadership of an empowered USTR.
So they said chapter 26. We will get there. I intend to go through the entire thing, the whole manifesto. We're 3 hours into this 4-hour section 1. And I believe there are 5 sections total, some longer than others. So it'll take us a while, about 6 months by my estimation, a little bit longer, but we'll get there.
To address these and other challenges, protect the American worker, and secure free and open markets for our communities and businesses, the next president must leverage the institutional resources and strength of the USTR, and neither allow institutional interests to drive a fragmented trade policy that is developed from the ground up, nor cater to parochial interests across government and Washington's broader industry of influence. The USTR's mission is vitally important in reorienting the global trading system in a direction that is open, fair, and prosperous.
Open, fair, and prosperous. I love how they virtue signal that they want these things, but they don't. They very clearly speak out against these things, in the next chapter, why even bother lying about it? I don't understand.
To achieve the president's policy goals, a strong USTR must be empowered to set trade policy from the White House with the authority and resources to represent the interests of the president's trade agenda with adequate budget, staff, analysis, and expertise to engage meaningfully in internal and interagency policy deliberations.
So they're coming up with organizations under the executive branch that should have a lot of funding, and they're listing organizations that should not have a lot of funding. So we're getting a list of kind of policies and programs that they value and those that they don't value. They're saying the trade organization that kind of handles trade in the United States needs more funding than it has now, I guess. And the Department of Education needs less. We need to put less money into, in fact, erase it. states should handle it themselves, which is a terrible idea.
The USTR should organize and harness existing interagency trade committees to serve the president's trade agenda and drive a consensus among federal stakeholders. Dispose of legacy advisory committees with members who serve special interests, direct action to implement policy priorities, measure progress toward implementing the president's agenda, and hold agencies and officia accountable for delivering the president's agenda.
So they should be monitoring these organizations and making sure that they're doing everything the president says, is what they're saying.
The USTR's leadership should not only coordinate and enforce the president's agenda across the federal community, but also set and enforce the president's trade agenda internally.
I see. So it's not like trade organization like worldwide, or not just worldwide, but it handles like inter-trade, like between states also, is what I'm reading. And I guess they're saying that they're going to police states and make sure that the states are following or doing what Trump wants them to do, even though the president is president of the federal government, not the states. The governors lead the states, not the U.S. president. What happened to all that stuff about like being pro-states' rights? You remember that? Remember them saying stuff about that? Pro-states' rights? Goes right out the window when it's convenient, doesn't it?
Policy and priorities should be set by the president and implemented by the U.S. trade representative in cooperation with the other economic and national security officia, not by the range of governmental and non-governmental interests that attempt to force their policy preferences on the USTR. A strong USTR empowered with the necessary resources, authorities, and interagency cooperation will protect U.S. interests in the global marketplace more effectively. Council of Economic Advisors, CEA. Congress established the Council of Economic Advisors in 1946 to advise the president on economic policy based on data, research, and evidence.
Interesting. So the Council of Economic Advisors established by Congress in 46 or something. And it's just like a group of advisors that are like just scientists and data analysis people.
CEA is one of the oldest congressionally created office within the White House complex and plays a broad role in bringing economic expertise to administration policy across a large range of policy areas. The CEA has one presidentially appointed and Senate-confirmed chair, two presidentially appointed members who assist and often have expertise that complements the chair, and approximately 40 staff employees.
Interesting. I didn't know about that.
Statutorily, the CEA is charged with being the president's principal source of economic advice. However, this role has diminished over time as its policy appraisal and especially formulation and recommendation functions have been taken over or diluted by other economic policy bodies within the White House. By law, the CEA is required to publish an annual economic report of the president within 10 days after submission of the budget.
So it sounds to me like they're talking about some old congressional office that doesn't even really exist anymore. And they're trying to like go back to using that. Why? Because it will concentrate power more?
This report is not just a messaging document. It is an opportunity to provide greater rigor in support of policy areas that the White House is prioritizing and to build up the external credibility of those ideas. A future conservative administration should utilize the CEA as the senior internal White House economists, much as the White House counsel's office functions as the senior internal White House lawyers.
Yeah, it sounds like what they're saying is this office doesn't even really exist anymore. But the president has more like direct control over the members, so he should be using that instead. Wow.
This does not mean that there are no economists in other office. There are, just as there often are lawyers in the policy councils and other White House office, but the CEA's role, like the White House counsel's, is to employ its unique expertise, particularly on the technical side, to ensure that sound analysis is contributing to and shaping the policy discussion. In practice, this means that CEA staff do not coordinate the policy process in the way that the DPC or NEC would, but they should be integral to the EOP's policy development processes. CEA staff
should be integral to the process, okay?
Should support sound policy development and execution by actively contributing to running policy dialogues, proactively raising issues that need to be addressed, consulting on questions that arise, and guiding EOP and agency officia on the analytical foundations of policy.
Yeah, so this section just sounds like they're trying to consolidate power and decrease the number of people that power is spread across. Democracy works because power is so, like, spread out. There isn't like a single person that can control everything at all times. And the more spread out it is, generally, the healthier the democracy, the better it performs, the more literacy rates go up, and the more successful it is generally. They're trying to concentrate power, trying to make this person as powerful as humanly possible. That's what this is about, it seems like, this part, I mean.
Structurally, the White House Chief of Staff should ensure that the CEA has a seat at the policymaking table on all relevant policy. Senior economists traditionally have not gone through the office of presidential personnel process, and more often than not are hired on an academic year cycle. ASA result: senior economists hired in the summer of a presidential election year tend to remain on staff until the next summer, even if a president from the opposite party takes power and installs a new slate of CEA political appointees for chair, members, etc.
Because it's not a political position. They're just there to explain the best way to like control the economy. That's it. That's the point. And they're saying we don't want to just like let these people do their jobs. We want them to be wild-eyed extremists, fanatics, wild-eyed fanatics of the Trump religion, effectively. These people are probably thinking, I mean, the Heritage Foundation, they're probably thinking wild-eyed fanatics for Jesus, but it effectively adds up to fanaticism for Donald Trump, since that's who they're trying to consolidate power around.
Although these hiring practices create some continuity, the presence of senior economists who were never fully vetted for their alignment with White House policy objectives or who were holdovers from a recently departed administration can breed skepticism and distrust of the CEA by other units within the White House.
No, it doesn't create skepticism or problems. This is the problem. People can be from different political parties and still just do their jobs. Project 2025 doesn't want them to just do their jobs. They want them to be political fanatics,
creating the risk that the CEA's role in the policymaking process will be diminished. A future administration should consider hiring that reflect the White House calendar, mid-January, and involves the office of presidential personnel. National Space Council. The National Space Council is responsible for providing...
So they said instead of like hiring them based on an academic year, because they're academics, they should be bringing them in on the presidential terms instead, thus making it a fully political position. It's a fully political position. These people must know what they're doing, and they must know that it's wrong, right? Concentrating power this way? How could they not?
Providing advice and recommendations to the president on the formulation and implementation of space policy and strategy. It is charged with conducting a whole-of-government approach to the nation's space interests, civil, military, intelligence, commercial, or diplomatic. Historically, it has been chaired by the vice president at the president's direction, and its members consist of members of the cabinet and other senior executive branch officia as specified by the president in Executive Order 13803. 32. The NSPC's purpose is to ensure that the president's priorities relative to space are carried out and, as necessary, to resolve policy conflict among departments and agencies that are related to space. Space projects and programs are risky, complex, expensive, and time-consuming, although...
I'm going to guess that they want to eliminate space programs completely, right? Or almost completely?
Commercial space innovations are lowering costs and accelerating schedules. Nevertheless, while fiscal discipline should not be ignored, long-term policy stability is crucial to investors, innovators, industry, and agencies.
Wow, okay. They're accurately pointing out that space exploration and NASA and stuff is not a waste of money because it leads to massive innovation.
Policy stability is easier when policies and programs are aligned with long-term national interests, as opposed to those of particular advocacy groups or political factions. The Trump administration's major space policies, including the U.S. Space Force, the Artemis program to land the next Americans on the moon, and support for a strong commercial space sector, have endured under the Biden administration. Major challenges remain in implementation and regulatory reform to keep up with rapidly evolving space markets and competitors, include the long-term sustainability of space activities in light of increasing orbital debris, creation of space situational awareness services for civil and commercial uses, management of mega constellations, licensing of new commercial remote sensing capabilities, keeping up with licensing demands due to high launch rates, transitioning international space station operations to multiple, privately owned space platforms, and, most important, accelerating the acquisition and fielding of national security space capabilities in response to an increasingly aggressive China. The Vice
Okay, so competing with China, they're saying, is what they're thinking about.
President should have a clear understanding with the National Security Advisor and the White House Counsel that they and their respective staff will work within the White House to determine the scope and leadership of policy reviews that can overlap multiple areas of responsibility. A similar understanding is necessary with the heads of other policy councils such as the NEC, DPC, and National Science and Technology Council, NSTC. As a result of the president's direction and the vice president's leadership, the NSPC under the Trump administration was able to coordinate a wide range of space policy reviews, legislative proposals, and regulatory reforms smoothly. The NSPC generally led on space issues within the EOP, but other White House office also took on space topics. As a member of the NSPC, and in coordination with other members, the Office of Science and Technology Policy developed a national space weather strategy, research and development, R&D plans to mitigate the effect of orbital debris, and protocols for planetary protection to avoid biological contamination.
Yes. We understand. This organization did a whole bunch of things. Okay, go on. I don't know what point they're getting at. Great, yes, I know. Organizations do stuff.
Of celestial bodies. The Council of Economic Advisors did research on the economic benefit of space property rights. LOMB's Office of Information and Regulatory Reform updated and streamlined commercial launch licensing and commercial remote sensing satellite rules. During the Trump administration, if a topic was purely military, such as standing up the U.S. Space Command, the NSC took the lead. If a topic cut across military, civil, and commercial sectors, as was the case with cybersecurity and space, the NSPC and NSC would co-chair the policy review groups. Trusted, collegial relationships across the White House complex are critical to successful space policy development, implementation, and oversight. Nowhere is this more important than in the relationship between the NSPC staff and OMB staff, who oversee civil and national security-related space spending.
So they're talking about like when it crosses over into multiple like organizations, fields of view, if you will, whatever. Okay, yeah, great. I mean, this is mostly just normal stuff right here. This isn't controversial, but they slip the most absolutely insane shit in here in random places.
Teamwork between the NSPC and OMB staff can communicate clear presidential priorities to departments and agencies, facilitating smooth development of the president's budget request. The NSPC and OMB have many opportunities to collaborate in promoting presidential priorities while finding offset in lower priority programs and funding lines. Office of
Earthbound says, why are they worried about space? It's fake. They'll never make it through the firmament. Right. Those are the types of people we're dealing with here.
Science and Technology Policy, OSTP. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, was created by the National Science and Technology Policy, Organization and Priorities Act of 1976. Creation, presidents received their advice and counsel on such matters through advisors and boards that had no statutory authority. The director of OSTP is one of the few Senate-confirmed positions within the executive office of the president.
So they're saying that the president gets a lot of like advice and stuff from organizations that can't make any rules. They can only like advise him, basically. That's it.
Consistent with other laws, the president may delegate to the director of OSTP directive authority over other elements of the executive branch. Other EOP policy officia and organizations such as the NSC and NEC are formally only advisory with relevant agency directives issued by the president. The OSTP's functions, as contained in the law, are to advise the president of scientific and technological considerations, evaluate the effectiveness of the federal effort, and generally lead and coordinate the federal government's R&D programs.
Right. They're just describing the responsibilities of this organization, okay?
If science is being manipulated at the agencies to support separate political and institutional agendas.
Which means if they're studying evolution at these government labs or whatever,
the president should increase the prominence of the OSTP's director, either formally or informally.
The president should replace the guy at the top and impose strict, like, top-down control. If they're studying evolution, for example.
This would elevate the role of science in policy discussions and subsequent outcomes, and theoretically help to balance out agencies like the Departments of Energy, State, and Commerce, and the Environmental Protection Agency, and Council on Environmental Quality.
Don't pretend you want to make things more fair and equal. They're pretending that if they impose strict top-down control on these organizations, it'll just be more fair because they've already created a strict top-down hierarchy for like the CIA. So we're only making it like even now. Come on, people.
OSTP can also help to bring technical expertise to regulatory matters in support of OMB. The OSTP should continue to play a lead role in coordinating federal R&D programs. Recent legislation, especially the CHIPS and Science Act 34, has expanded federal policy and funding across the enterprise, and there is a need for more significant leadership in this area, both to ensure effectiveness and to avoid duplication of effort. As befitting its location in the White House, the OSTP must be concerned with advancing national interests and not merely the parochial concerns of departments, agencies, or parts of the scientific community. During the Trump and Biden administration.
So they just said this organization should be concerned with political interests, not scientific interests. That's literally what they just said. Listen one more time.
And not merely the parochial concerns of departments.
Step back a little further here.
The OSTP must be concerned with advancing national interests and not...
Advancing national interests is code for doing what the president wants them to do, specifically. Political interest is what it means.
Merely the parochial concerns of departments, agencies, or parts of the scientific community.
And not focused on the scientific community or how they can benefit science. So the EPA, for example, is studying, how germs are affected by certain substances, and they happen across this fact that they discover about evolution. They should be replaced. Everybody at the EPA should be replaced, and they should be refocused on national security somehow. Like, I don't know how that would even work.
During the Trump and Biden administrations, there has been a bipartisan focus on prioritizing R&D funding around the so-called Industries of the Future, IOTF. Under President Trump, IOTF priorities were artificial intelligence, AI, quantum information science, QIS, advanced communications 5G, advanced manufacturing, and biotechnology. Under President Biden, this list has been expanded to include advanced materials, robotics, battery technology, cybersecurity, green products and clean technology, plant genetics and agricultural technologies, nanotechnology, and semiconductor and microelectronics technologies. These priorities should be evaluated and narrowed to ensure consistency with the next administration's priorities. Given a long list of priorities, coordinating effort across agencies and measuring success are extremely challenging. The OSTP and OMB are required to work together on an annual basis to prioritize the funding requests and whatever Congress adds on top of them. But there continues to be concern about mission creep and funds expended on non-scientific R&D. The president should also issue an executive order to reshape the U.S. Global Change Research Program.
So they're saying that, these organizations, they are doing good work in some cases, but there's sometimes they reach outside of their purview and they start studying things that are not useful to Donald Trump. So they should be tightly controlled for that reason.
USGCRP and related climate change research programs.
Oh yeah, no climate change research too. I forgot about that one. The EPA, if they start studying climate change, they should be replaced. The people at the EPA should be replaced with Trump appointees, I guess, all of them. They're leaving some of the scientists and bureaucrats in place, some of them that they can't just outright replace because there are protections like worker protections, but they should offer them a buyout of 12 months or whatever and get them to quit so that they can be replaced with Trump supporters.
The USGCRP produces strategic plans and research, for example, the National Climate Assessment, that reduce the scope of legally proper options in presidential decision-making and in agency rulemakings and adjudications. Also, since much environmental policymaking must run the gauntlet of judicial review, USGCRP actions can frustrate successful litigation defense in ways that the career bureaucracy should not be permitted to control.
Wow, that's interesting. So they're saying in some cases, our policy proposals in the EPA, in some cases, the EPA, the things that we want the EPA to do, which will be political, have to pass through judicial review. They have to go through a court to make sure that it's legal that they do this. And in that case, what?
So, since much environmental policymaking must run the gauntlet of judicial review, USGCRP actions can frustrate successful litigation defense.
So this specific organization, can stop that from happening, can stop judicial review. They can prevent it from working. We can stop climate change study at the EPA by using this organization. I mean, what is wrong with these people? What is going through their heads? Why are they like this? Why are they so dead set on not studying climate change? Really?
In ways that the career bureaucracy should not be permitted to control. The process for producing assessments should include diverse viewpoints. The OSTP and OMB should jointly assess the independence of the contractors used to conduct much of this outsourced research that serves as the basis for policymaking. The next president should critically analyze and, if required, refuse to accept any USGCRP assessment prepared under the Biden administration. The president should also restore related EOP research components to their purely informational and advisory roles.
So gut these organizations completely. Erase everything that the Biden administration put into the EPA to strengthen it or anything. Erase it all. Just get rid of all of it.
Consistent with the Global Change Research Act of 1990, 35 USGCRP-related EOP components should be confined to a more limited advisory role. These components should include but not necessarily be limited to the OSTP.
So they're saying regulatory agencies like the EPA, they shouldn't be regulating. They should just tell the president what they think they should do, basically. That's my read on this.
The NSTC's Committee on Environment, the USGCRP's interagency groups, for example, the Carbon Cycle Interagency Working Group, and the Federal Coordinating Council for Science, Engineering, and Technology. As a general matter, the new administration should separate the scientific risk assessment function from the risk management function, which is the exclusive domain of elected policymakers and the public. Finally, the next administration will face a significant challenge in unwinding policies and procedures that are used to advance radical gender, racial, and equity initiatives under the banner of science.
Wow. So, oh my God. So organizations that are studying human anatomy or psychology or whatever, and happen across this subject of gender studies or whatever, they should be redirected or shut down completely.
Similarly, the Biden administration's climate fanaticism will need a whole of government unwinding.
Yeah, I knew that they wanted to just remove all mentions of climate change from the government entirely, including studies or anything at all.
As with other federal departments and agencies, the Biden administration's leveraging of the federal government's resources to further the woke agenda should be reversed and scrubbed from all policy manuals, guidance documents, and agendas.
Woke agenda. Biden administration's woke agenda on climate change. I got to write this down.
and scientific excellence and innovation should be restored as the OSTP's top priority. Council on Environmental Quality. The Council on Environmental Quality is the EOP component with the principal task of administering the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA 36, by issuing regulations and interpretive documents, and by overseeing the processes of individual permitting agencies' own NEPA regulations, including categorical exclusions. The CEQ also coordinates environmental policy across the federal government, and its influence has waxed and waned across administrations. The President should instruct the CEQ to rewrite its regulations implementing NEPA along the lines of the historic 2020 F4 and restoring its key provisions, such as banning the use of cumulative impact analysis.
Wow, dude. Cumulative impact analysis is, to my knowledge, the study of how climate change will get worse exponentially. Like, it's not on a linear path. Like, today we're at, an ocean temperature of, 90 degrees. And tomorrow it'll be like 90.001, and the next day, 0.002. It's not linear like that. It's exponential. It's going to get exponentially bad. Is going to like triple, quadruple in how intensely bad it is. These people are saying, don't study that anymore. No more studying it. That is psychotic. Why are they like this? Like, why are they so dead set against climate change research? This is wild.
This effort should incorporate new learning and more aggressive reform options that were not included in the 2020 reform package, with the overall goal of streamlining the process to build on the Supreme Court ruling that CEQ's interpretation of NEPA is entitled to substantial deference. 37. It should frame the new regulations to limit the scope for judicial review of agency NEPA analysis and judicial remedies, as well as to vindicate the strong public interest in effective and timely agency action. The Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council, FPISC, of which the CEQ is a part, has been empowered by Congress through significant new funding and amendments to FAST 41. 38. The President should build on this foundation to further empower the FPSC by making its executive director an EOP appointee with delegated presidential directive authority over executive branch permitting agencies. For instance, the implementation of Executive Order 13807's 1 Federal Decision 39 revealed many ways that the systems established by EO 13807 can be improved. The new president should seek to issue a new executive order to create a unified process for major infrastructure projects that includes giving project proponents more control of any regulatory clocks. The President should issue an executive order establishing a senior advisor to coordinate the policy development and implementation of relevant energy and environment policy by officia across the EOP, for example, the policy staff of the NSC, DPC, CEQ, and OSTP, and abolishing...
God, so many acronyms. Like, my God, why does the government have so many acronyms? I don't understand.
The existing Office of Domestic Climate Policy. The senior advisor would report directly to the Chief of Staff. The role would be similar to the role that Brian Deese and John Podesta had in the Obama White House. This Energy Environment Coordinator would help to lead the fight for sound energy and environment policies, both domestically and internationally.
They're saying they're eliminating all climate change research. However, some climate change research is useful for innovation. So we're going to have a political appointee. We're going to have Donald Trump pick one guy that's going to oversee the project directly to make sure that it's not getting into wokeism. It's solely focused on innovation and nothing more. Wow.
The President should eliminate the Interagency Working Group on the Social Cost of Carbon, SCC, which is co-chaired by the OSTP, OMB, and CEA, and by executive order should end the use of SCC analysis.
The SEC should no longer track carbon use. They should no longer track how much damage companies are doing to the environment.
The President should work with Congress to establish a sweeping modernization of the entire permitting system across all departments and agencies that is aimed at reducing litigation risk and giving agencies the authority to establish programmatic, general, and provisional permits.
They're saying, basically, we need to get a lawyer that kind of oversees this whole thing to make sure that we're not going to be sued. That's it. We need to eliminate it and get a lawyer in there to make sure that we aren't going to be sued to force us to study this stuff because it's our government obligation according to a number of documents.
Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP. Congress created the Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP, through the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988-40 to serve as a coordinative auxiliary for the President on all matters related to drug policy. The next President's top drug policy priority must be to address the current fentanyl crisis and reduce the number of overdoses and fatalities.
God, I don't know what Project 2025's position is going to be on drug use, fentanyl, or whatever. A lot of these people have what I call strict father morality, where they believe that if you're an addict, you should just get over it. Just stop. As my grandma used to say, just don't bend your elbow. Just, you got to put it in your mouth. Don't bend your elbows. Keep your elbows straight and you won't do any drugs. It's that kind of thing. That's not how it works. And West Virginia, one of the most conservative states in existence, learned that the hard way. There was a massive drug epidemic. Huntington, West Virginia was the center of the opioid epidemic worldwide, to my knowledge. And West Virginia had that strict parent morality mindset until hepatitis C followed the drug epidemic in, at which point they had no choice but to do something about it. They had to do something about it. So what did they do? Needle exchange programs, which is fantastic. It's good. It's a progressive solution to the public health crisis. But as, strict father morality people, Project 2025 probably won't accept that as an answer, that type of thing. Something I learned is it doesn't matter. Like when the rubber meets the road, it doesn't matter how ideologically psychotic you are. You're going to have to do things to solve real problems that exist in the world. You're going to have to, like the hepatitis C problem. Project 2025 is, as far as I can tell, trying to write it into the code that they're not allowed to do things that could help. I mean, we haven't listened to the whole drug part yet. I just about guarantee you that that's what they're going to have to say in it. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. We'll hit the drug section next, probably.